Welcome to a Wonder Junkie podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Anderson.
Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows. Nobody has the faintest idea. The best guesses are lies. You may be sure of it.
I've been reading about you and listening to you, and I think your resume is quite dense, and you've done a lot of beautiful things. So,
Oh, thank you. You've done some beautiful things as well. How's it going? How's the podcast coming? What's in your world?
thank you. I've been a first responder for 20 years. I'm still doing it, and this is more of a hobby on the side. And I've done 65, I think, in 1 year. So
Uh,
I'm just enjoying learning from other people and sharing, other people's
uh,
essence with the world. So it's pretty fun.
Maybe I can be a Route 66 that provides a connective tissue between some of them in there. I'm so happy for you, and the podcast doing pretty good. You're getting some. You got a lot of great reviews. 4.9 stars. You're rocking on, dude. It's good stuff.
Yeah,
Ah,
thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, I work with a lot of ex-military guys, and I've gotten to be friends with quite a few people that have been,
yeah,
Navy SEALs and
yeah,
even Delta Force guys over the years. And
yeah.
it's been really
Isn't that
cool
amazing?
to, yeah, just be around people that are in that field of service, but then
Yeah.
also trying to get it to understand the psychology and how do we stay healthy, happy,
Amen.
and
Amen.
all that. And that's what your work seems to have transitioned to over the last however many years, decades.
Well, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. FDNY brings me out a couple, 3 times a year, close to a decade now. They've got a great program where they're trying to take the top people in the top fields and bring them in to bring them up. And for example, sports psychology or sleep psychology, and it's really an honor to be part of that. But I've always been part of that first responder community. We wrote a couple of books. We wrote the prayers and promises for first responders. So is here I am at 68 years old, still going good. And the most wondrous thing is that we can keep being better people, that we can keep being a little gentler, a little kinder, a little wiser as years go by. It's really pretty astounding just to see progress in just the last couple of years. And talk about that. I teach resiliency to military, law enforcement, first responders, and the heart of resiliency is classic stoicism. The only thing, Viktor Frankl in a Nazi death camp, the only thing universe those Nazi bastards couldn't control is how I choose to respond. And the point is, you don't lose your temper; you give it away. It's the only thing universe you can control. That's easy to say; it ain't so easy to do. So we can talk about ways to do that, ways to control that temper, and little life hacks that we can use to bring that under control. And then kind of come full circle, if you don't mean to the faith side of that equation, and some of the books we've done there. It's had a good path, kind of to outline for us to do in this next hour.
Absolutely. I'm just happy to have you here, and I love to do conversation based. This
Yeah.
podcast is very natural and conversation based, so there really doesn't have to be a regimented way. But I'm so happy to have you share anything you're
Oh,
willing to share today. And the Stoics have been hugely impactful for me too, and I love Viktor Frankl. I think I've handed that book out more than any book in my
yeah,
life to friends and people I
yeah.
love. So
And totally compatible with Christianity too, and that's important to understand. That ultimate question: how could a loving God allow these terrible things to happen? And that's
yep.
really the definitive question that everybody's got to answer, and every first responder really needs to have a grip on, and it's worth addressing. So
I appreciate you joining me this morning. I don't know if you want me to address you Lieutenant.
Just Dave, Brian,
Just
just
Dave.
Dave.
You like Dave? All
Yeah,
right,
it
cool.
works out really good. It really
Well,
does.
nice to have you, Dave. I
Oh man,
appreciate
it's
you.
good to be here. And I
Yeah.
love the concept, just this wonder in life. I'm 68 years old and still filled with wonder and the joy and the personal progress, being a better person, as time goes by and continuing to serve. 68 years old on the road constantly, training military, law enforcement, first responders. I love what just this whole concept of wonder, and kind of to start my path of wonder.
Mm-hmm.
My first book, I got 16 books in print, 17 just went to the publishers, was on killing. 500,000 copies sold worldwide, translated into a bunch of languages. Marine Corps commandants required reading lists from the beginning and required reading in peace studies programs in Berkeley. So how do you make Berkeley and the Marine Corps have the same book, you know?
Wow.
And, and I coined the term Killology. And what I told people is that criminology is not about teaching people to be criminals. And Killology is not about teaching people to kill. It's about understanding the factors that enable and restrain killing in our society. And really the amazing thing to wrap your mind around is how rare killing is. Now, we're a nation of over 1/3 billion people. Every day, there's roughly, and it varies greatly, 50 murders. There are one murder per state per day.
Hmm.
So you point some terrible murder in the headlines. That proves that mankind's a killer. Well, it's an outlier. It's one and a third of a billion. You know, you explain to me the 99.999999 who didn't kill anybody today. Explain that. Divorce, infidelity, layoff, traffic accidents, in a lifetime of provocation. Listen, in 1 in 1,000 people even seriously attempt to take a human life. Explain that. I mean, there's joy in that. In World War II, we found out most of the troops wouldn't pull the trigger. It was a training flaw. We're trying to shoot bullseye targets. I've known no case any bullseyes ever attacking our troops. So if you've been in the armed forces since the Korean War, you never once shot no bullseye. Man-shaped silhouette pops you in field of view, hit the target drops. Stimulus response, like a pilot in a flight simulator, like a kid in a fire drill. Modern military law enforcement training makes killing a conditioned response to adults with discipline. And oh, by the way, the video games could be doing the same thing to our kids. The book came out in 1995. It was 3 years for Jonesboro, 4 years for the Columbine School Massacre. I said we might be raising a generation of killers like nothing we've ever seen before. And here's the thing, you know, if just 1 in a million is pushed over the edge, then that's an extra 300 murders a day. Just 1 in a million. It's extra 300 murders a day. So knowing the factors and able to understand what we can do about it are really, really, really important things. It's that kind of makes sense for a priority for a healthy society.
Absolutely. And did you write that book after you retired, after all the years in service, and then you got into psychology and teaching psychology? Is that correct?
Well, you know, what happened was I wrote the book while I was in. I was teaching at West Point as West Point psych professor. I didn't graduate West Point, came up through the ranks. I think I was the only OCS guy teaching at West Point at that point. And but I was a young private, 82nd Airborne Division, you know, young sergeant, paratrooper. And we had Vietnam vets all around us. And we were ready to punch out to combat anytime. You know, we wanted to know what combat was like. And they wouldn't say. I mean, it was like this taboo topic. And I realized today it's really like sex, you know. Say, hey, man, how's the sex life going? How long, you know, how many times get it on? How is it going? It's just this really intimate and taboo topic. And I thought, what was it? And my first, I mean, as a young sergeant going to night school to go to OCS, my first paper was on how military marksmanship training is a form of operant conditioning. And so I wrote my first book, and it really had an impact. But after more years of research, I realized what was at the heart of combat was not killing, although it was things like auditory exclusion and slow motion time and tunnel vision, and memory gaps and memory distortions, and it's like if you calculate all the things that happen, it meets every definition of a psychotic episode. You know, one out of 5 cops just flat remember something that didn't happen. Half of all cops have blackouts. We have slow motion time, and it's real, and it freaks people out. We have tunnel vision. We have auditory exclusion. I wrote the book on hunting, and the only other place, and the majesty of hunting and being part of the food cycle and who we are, and throughout the history of our species, we've been hunters. It's you know, so this whole business of auditory exclusion. Hunters will tell you they don't hear the shot, but nobody talks about it. They all live in that little silo. They all have the exact same experience, and nobody talks about the fact I didn't hear the shot and my ears don't ring.
Yeah.
And just to kind of touch base on the hunting thing, if our species had been in existence for 24 hours, up until the last 6 minutes, all we did was hunt. That's what we're wired to do. But here's the thing. We have the forward set eyes of a predator. We're the gripping fangs of a predator. We also have the chisel teeth of a crap yourself and run like hell rabbit. We're the grinding molars of a grass eater. It says, I don't have to outrun the predator. I just got to outrun the slowest guy in the herd. And we've been in the middle of the food chain. And we don't like that. We don't want to be the prey. We want to be the hunter. We don't want to be the hunted.
Mm.
And we talk about in the book on hunting, the the British government in India says between the 1900 and 1910, in the first decade of the 1900s in India, over 100,000 people were killed by tigers. That's just what we knew about. We're in the middle of the food chain. And so what's happened is a lot of people have decided that they can't be the hunter, they got to be the prey. And they lead the rat race, and I'm not saying you got to hunt. I'm just saying you got to say, no, I'm not the prey. I got all these prey neurons, live your life in fear, crap yourself, run like hell. I outrun the slowest guy in the herd. We got all those neurons there, and they don't make us happy. They're not where we want to be. And so seeking wonder, that's what the hunter does. The prey, they gather in herds and they're always watching the six. The hunter is actually out there in the wilderness. It is their domain. And they're out there seeking wonder. And the hunter, to be part of the cycle of life, to harvest your own protein, to be part of that whole process, we've lost that. And we've convinced a lot of our society. They just grew up thinking. So I coined the term the sheepdog. First responders are sheepdogs. I actually have the U.S. government trademark for the term sheepdog. And I wrote the book, the Sheepdog Kids book, and the whole sheep, the wolf, the sheepdog essays out of my book on combat. And so we talked about being the sheepdog. And we love dogs, and they're predators. They're omnivores. They eat anything. They eat everything, but they like to eat meat. Any dog will tell you they like to eat meat, and then they like to hunt, and that's why we like them. And so we're the sheepdog. We don't have to. My dog's never killed anything in their life. But a lot of squirrels have been chased after, but none of them have been killed. But that's what we like. We like cats. We like dogs, and they're predators.
Mm.
And they really, their mindset, they're not out killing things every day, but that mindset is what we identify with and what we like and where we want to be, and our wellness revolves around it. And so the whole thing is, has taken a crazy trip from killing to combat to hunting. This book was translated in Ukrainian, won a Ukraine Book of the Year award. And last May, June, I was in Ukraine, training troops across Ukraine, another part of the whole wondrous
Hmm.
path. And so that's the answer to your question. Where did it begin?
Yeah.
If somebody asks you, even a friend asks you about your sex life, you blow them off. But if Masters and Johnson in a scholarly study asks you, you might tell them. And so that's what happened. If I've just cracked open all those doors, nobody ever looked at what's
Yeah.
actually happening in combat, and then how the same thing happens when you hunt. You don't hear the shot. And every hunter has the same experience, and nobody talked about it. They all live in that little silo. I can't talk about this. This is crazy. And just now we're talking about all that, and we've opened all those doors, and so much of post-traumatic stress disorder is really something we can deal with. We just got to be warned how the mind and body will respond and what to do about it. And I teach that. I taught Department of Defense wide psychiatric grand rounds about PTSD, and so that's where the whole the trip has evolved to. Kind of makes sense in a logical standpoint.
Yeah. And do you encourage people who have had to kill people in battle to have that conversation with the average person, the civilian, like their loved ones, or how does that conversation go? Or what do you
It's
what do you
funny.
advise in that regard?
When the book on killing, I spent a decade writing this book, and I would present to World War II veterans reunions and Vietnam veterans reunions and conduct surveys afterwards. Now, this is in the 1980s. All those World War II vets are gone now, and a lot of those Vietnam vets are gone now. They're a
Hmm.
rare and precious commodity. And I was presenting to them, by the thousands, interviewing them by the hundreds. And I had early drafts of the book. And this is back in the day when you have Xerox copies, and I'd give a veteran a copy of the current draft. And their wife would lock right onto it. And the wife would read it and say, "Oh, is that what it's like for you?" Then read the damn book. So
Mm.
they would read the book, and then for the first time they could discuss it. And then the wife would make, 20 Xerox copies and send it off to 20 other wives, and they would read it and ask their husband. And so it became this form of reference for them to talk about this they never talked about before. When we
Mm.
talk about developmental hurdles, potty training is, it's autonomy versus, shame and doubt. And it goes on. There's things we got to achieve at various levels. But at the end of our life cycle, there's this closure is really what we need. And being able to talk about those things and form closure is really important. But the thing that I found out was these World War II vets, these Vietnam vets, Vietnam was the youngest war. They were 18-year-old draftees, just the vast majority. And we'd peel some loose and send them OCS and send them to, NCO schools. So we had 19-year-olds leading 18-year-olds. And they came in as strangers, left as strangers. We just did everything wrong in that war. We did so much. We hurt so many people, and they really did come home. They really were spit on and condemned. It really did happen. It's in the book.
Mm.
And we messed so many people up. But what I began to realize as the years went by, here's this dignified, noble, 75-year-old World War II vet, but he was an 18-year-old kid drafted off the streets. A few short months later, ambushed some guy and done him no harm. And for those 18-year-old kids, it was hard. But what I found out was for mature individuals to prepare themselves, mind, body, and spirit, it's just not that big a deal.
Hmm.
People are offended by that. Oh, Grossman says you kill somebody, be just fine. Well, what do you want? You want one-shot cops, one-shot soldiers? Use one time and throw them away. The World War II generation truly was the greatest generation. And what you have is post-traumatic growth. And there's a source of wonder. The vast majority do not have post-traumatic stress. They have post-traumatic growth. And even those who do have post-traumatic stress makes us stronger. And you come out the other end with post-traumatic growth. And when it gets really bad, it's post-traumatic stress disorder. And we're really good at treating PTSD. We're really, really good. California has kind of mandated that we call it post-traumatic stress injury. And that's good because you
Hmm.
recover from an injury and you're stronger.
Yeah.
Hemingway said, life breaks everyone, and usually we're stronger in the broken spots. So that idea of coming out the other end stronger. And so
Hmm.
those the veterans of this war over and over again say, I got no trouble killing the bad guy in this war. And I believe them. That's how you'd want it to be. You don't want them to be broken. And so I had to lead some friends over there. I got to let go of them. That's the hard part, survivor guilt. And survivor guilt is not PTSD, it's grieving, it's loss, it's hard, but
Mm.
it's normal. In the normal cycle of life, we will all bury our parents. It's normal, but it's hard.
Hmm.
And burying our comrades, our loved ones, is hard. But I've got what's called the universal human equation. Pain shared is pain divided, and joy shared is joy multiplied. And that's how
Is
we
that
handle our pain. We go to a funeral. We laugh at funerals. I laughed at my dad's funeral, and we had funny stories, and we'd laugh and we cry. We laugh and cry, and pain shared is pain divided, and joy shared is joy multiplied. But the thing to understand is survivor guilt is grieving.
yeah.
Well, we can put numbers on pain. We can measure hormones in your body and put a number on pain. And the two most difficult things you'll ever do is death of your parents and death of your spouse. And yet it's normal. It's a cycle of life. And it's hard when we lose our parents, but we come out the other end stronger and wiser people. We realize how precious every moment can be.
Yeah.
And to me,
It
that's the
seems to
greatest
go
wonder of all. Is
goes
we can
back to
keep them
your,
better.
you brought up Viktor Frankl and Stoicism, and a lot of it is that
Yeah,
relationship to your experience, creating that meaning. And I feel like if you identify as a victim, or you identify as
yeah,
oh poor me, versus seeking opportunity and creating a powerful, truthful
right.
narrative, which is like I had the opportunity to
Yeah,
X, Y, and Z, whether it be first
yeah,
responder or veteran.
yeah,
But what about the decompression time? Is that a big reason why so many people now seem to come immediately back from the war zone back to
yeah,
society, and
yeah,
that time frame is shorter, right? And they don't have
yeah,
that decompression zone.
yeah. Well, we really did it wrong in Vietnam. You know, in World War II, they sailed home together, and they had this decompression time, and they really were able to debrief. You know, the important part of the healing is you talk about an incident, and then you re-experience it, and that is not PTSD. Is normal. Give the example of Arkansas State Trooper. First gunfight, bad guy's down, he's alive. A week later, he and his wife are at a swim meet, watching their daughter to swim meet. Probably a starter's gun went off when he didn't expect it. Boom, heart pounding, gasping for air, drenched with sweat. His wife thought he'd had a heart attack. He didn't know what was happening.
Mm.
And the thing is, it is not PTSD. How you deal with it will decide whether or not it becomes PTSD. Now he pushed on through it. He went out to the range, and but imagine he said, "I can never go to a swim meet again. I can't. I hate 4th of July. I can't go to the range anymore. I can't do my job anymore." You will literally drive yourself crazy trying to not think about it. You got to make peace with the memory. Got to separate the memory from the emotion. And so when you re-experience that event, you got to be warned it's going to be happening. And what we do is that the critical healing, CISM, critical incident stress management, I teach at their international conference in Baltimore quite a few times. And everybody has a chance, one good sleep cycle later, as a minimum, we sit and we talk. And what's really important, people have terrible memory gaps. And if we know that's going to happen, then we're so much able to fill in the memory gaps. And people have terrible memory distortions. And they're almost always something they did wrong. They have hallucinations, and the hallucinations are almost always something negative. And the
Mm.
people there said, "No, dude, that didn't happen." And if you know those happen, you're far more like to say, "Oh, we heard about that." You know, a, uh, a police chief told me about a memory distortion. Uh, a police officer, suicidal kid's got a gun under his chin. The cop's got his gun up, trying to talk the kid down. That cop knows the kid, trying to talk him down. Ordinarily, being around suicidal people with a gun is not smart. You got cover and distance, but the kid says, "Oh, okay, I won't do it." Pulled his gun down. Cop brought his gun down. Kid pulled the gun up, shot himself, died.
Mm.
Cop said, "I had an accidental discharge. I shot him." "No, you didn't. Your gun was never discharged. Entry wound was here." Was it? "No, I shot him." "No, you
Mm.
didn't." I said, I have a clear memory. I pulled the trigger. It hit him, and no. And the chief said we had to coach him. We went to grand jury. "Here is the truth. Your weapon was never fired. We did a check on your hands. No, you never fired a weapon. His weapon, the entry wound could not have been you. His weapon was fired. You got
Mm.
to go to the grand jury and tell them that." So he did. And the chief said on the way out, he said, "Chief, are you sure I didn't shoot him?" So
Wow.
here's one case. He had no idea this could happen. He was blindsided by it. But then a Navy psychiatrist told me about a Marine. Now, my book's required reading, On Killing, On Combat. So he's read the book. He knows this is going to happen. He knows this is normal. So Navy psychiatrist said, psychologist, this kid said he's wounded, but he's in country. And he said, I didn't take a shot, and that guy killed my buddy. I failed to take the shot, and that guy went on to kill my buddy, and I failed. So the squad was able to come back and do a debriefing. This debriefing is essential. You hold these lives in your hands in the battle, and hold those lives in your hands after the battle. Everybody in the squad said, "No, dude, you never had a shot. It wasn't even in your sector. There's no way you could have had that shot." And the guy said, "Whoa, that's one of those memory distortions we read about." "Okay." You see, if you warn about this stuff ahead of time, but the trick is when you talk about it, you re-experience it. The sympathetic nervous system kicks in. It's not PTSD, but what you got to do is you got to leash in that response. And one of the great tools we found, UC is breathing. There's a big swig of water. It is a friend of mine is a therapist for a major federal agency. Somebody is in a deadly force incident. They fly her in, and she has them. What we do is we sit and talk about what happened. And every time they start to become emotional, stop,
Hmm.
take a big swig of water, and from the very beginning, separate the memory from the emotion. She told me, she said, 6 years of college, 14 years of practice, and that stupid bottle of water is doing more good than I've ever done. Now, if that don't work, if you can't separate the memory from the emotions, then we got all kinds of tricks to do it. EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprogramming. And what happens is the midbrain is this is kicking off the sympathetic nervous system, autonomic nervous system kicking off. And the midbrain is a simple mechanism. I call it the puppy inside. Puppy can only do one thing at a time. And with the EMDR, you follow a visual stimulus. And while your midbrain is following that visual stimulus, the puppy's busy chasing a ball in the front yard. And for the first time, you can talk about it without having that physiological arousal come along for the ride. Very often, in just one or two EMDR sessions, we can separate the memory from the emotion. So the point is that to warn people, you re-experience the event is normal. And we're really, really good at treating it, and the path to healing is separate the memory from the emotion. And the most critical component is that debriefing. Now, all first responders do a debriefing. We learn the tactical lessons. We see what everybody's doing. But that debriefing is more than just learning. The Army calls it AAR, after action review. We know in a training event, the majority of the learning happens after the event. But how much more so should we capture the lessons the lessons learned in a real event? But we also fill in those memory gaps and sort out those memory distortions and send people down the path to healing.
Mm.
And so it's all that's all been my path, this healing path, to
Yeah.
letting people know it's just so important to know just these fundamentals that we just talked about.
Yeah. And
Now,
I've
as a
noticed
first
you.
responder, does that make sense
Yeah,
to you from your own experience?
absolutely. Yeah, totally. And I think when I was listening to you before, there was a piece on the proclivity to violence and how that can be trained and honed in a positive way. And a lot of people in the first responder community have that nature. Like, we like excitement, we want to be the helpers, but it's like, how do you shut that off when you get home? And
Yeah,
there's got to be these tools, whether it be breath work or certain breathing techniques when you're going to bed at night. And then the sleep deprivation piece too, with
oh,
culture, is like, our guys still to this day will say sleep when you're dead, or they make fun of you if you talk about sleep as this thing. And it's like, that's the number one life support system.
yes,
That's the
yes.
best thing to reset the nervous system and the mind and the
Yeah.
body. So
I was going to write a book, and then somebody wrote it for me, and I'm so glad they did. And I wrote the forward to the book. It's called The Sleep Advantage, the FBI Sleep Doc. It's going to be out soon, and you should talk with her. But we're the number one threat to our civilization right now, I believe with all my heart, is a global epidemic of sleep deprivation.
hmm.
Sleep deprivation is a huge factor in suicide. People don't realize that. Now, right now, you cannot take your life. The drive for self-preservation is just so powerful. You cannot override it. But what happens is you got all these problems and you add alcohol. And alcohol very often is a catalyst that inhibits that drive to self-preservation. You got all these other problems and alcohol, boom. But sleep deprivation does the exact same thing. Sleep deprivation is just like being drunk. And so in almost every way. And that's a really useful and accurate and valuable assessment. If somebody showed up at work drunk, you kick his ass. Shows up at work sleep deprived because he played freaking games. Hey man, I played little game all night long. It's not acceptable. I
Right.
say that to a class of first responders or military. And I see you sit up, you've been playing freaking games all night long. It's just like showing up work drunk. You need your tail kicked. I'd say, a lot of you look at me like a deer in the headlight right now. Dude, you're talking straight to me. I said, you didn't know. It's okay. But now you know damn well I'm right. You can't keep doing things that way. So that the link suicides have exploded across our entire civilization. And we got like teenagers, 10, 11, 12-year-old teenage girls' suicide rates tripled. And the new factors, sleep deprivation. You're only drunk for a short window.
Mm.
If you show up work drunk an hour later, you'll be usable. Show up work sleep deprived. Unless you go to bed, it just keeps getting worse. And so parenting 101 for the 21st century, you should be scared sick about suicide. I lost a little brother and two nephews to suicide.
Mm.
And it's the most devastating thing that could happen to any family, and it's exploding. It's
Yeah.
become one of the number one causes, if not the number one cause of death to our kids. And when you send your kid to bed at night, take their cell phone away from them. They got to go to the room and sleep, and they got to sleep in the darkness.
Yeah.
And a cop came up to me during a break. He said, I had one of those teenagers. He said, she was a good girl. She was an A student. She said, Dad, it's embarrassing. You don't have to take my cell phone every night. You can trust me. He said, okay, keep your cell phone. Family policy is cell phone with a charger and go to bed. I said,
Mm.
okay, I trust you. He said, a little while later, she took her life. He said, my little girl took her life. And we never knew the hell she was living in until we looked at the text messages on her cell phone.
Mm.
Night after night of ceaseless, relentless, vicious bullying. And you can't just ignore that. We're not wired that way. He said it was heart-rending to see her all night long trying to defend herself, trying to find somebody to stand up for her. He said, I immediately understood my little girl was bullied to death. What I didn't understand until now, she was sleep deprived, tormented to death in front of my eyes. I let it happen. He
Damn.
said, I can't ignore that text message in the middle of the night. How can we expect our kids to? So who's going to be your mommy? Who's going to make you get that sleep? So the other thing, that is sleep deprivation and traffic deaths and pedestrian deaths. They've exploded worldwide. What is a new factor? Decade after decade, we brought traffic deaths down, airbags, seatbelts, medical technology. Now they've exploded. What's the new factor? Sleep deprivation. It's a huge factor in chronic pain, which is the root cause in the opiate epidemic. We've all had a bad night's sleep and we're hurt the next day. Sleep deprivation creates chronic pain. Doc, I heard all the time, give me a pill to fix. You don't need a pill, you need more sleep. So fentanyl's an opiate. Why fentanyl? Why is it the drug of choice? Fentanyl kills somewhere between 60 and 80,000 Americans a year. The entire stinking 20 years of Vietnam, we lost less than 60,000. We lose more to fentanyl every year than Vietnam and the entire war. And it's an opiate. And we're not even talking about prescription opiates and all the people that are abusing those. Why is it the drug of choice? This global epidemic of sleep deprivation is causing a global epidemic of pain. And they're all turned into opiates. And the body craves rest and the body craves sleep. And when you're sleep deprived, all of those stressors amplify each other. And when you're sleep deprived, the opiates are boom, they're filling those holes that you need so desperately. So here's drug overdoses are the number one killer of adults in America. Suicide's the number one killer of our teenagers. Traffic deaths fall right in between, filling in those gaps.
Mm.
And then sleep deprivation, a huge factor in Alzheimer's. I should scare that, like you say, I'll sleep when I'm dead. You have a decade of Alzheimer's first, you idiot. And so what we got to do, we got to teach our kids. We got this civilization of sleep deprived people out there, and they're ugly to each other, they're mean to each other, and they're cruel to each other, and they're just short tempered, and they're doing stupid stuff, and it's globally. We see homicides up, and we see assaults up, and we got this epidemic of sleep deprivation. And the video game industry doesn't care that they're killing your kids. The head of Netflix said our competitors sleep. They don't care that they're killing people. They just want to sell their product. They don't care that they're destroying our civilization. They just want to sell the product. And they want to sell it to children. I wrote the book, Assassination Generation, about the video games. In 2005, the state of California overwhelmingly voted to regulate children's access to violent video games. Hollywood said, we're good at that. Silicon Valley said, yeah, we're good at that. Arnold Schwarzenegger signed the law. Overwhelmingly, California voted to regulate children's sex. We had the brain scan data. Here's a kid's brain. Here's a kid's brain on video games. Violent visual imagery inflicted upon children. The body's going to fight or flight mode. And so the video game industry fought all the way to the Supreme Court to sell any game to any kid at any age.
Wow.
Where you cross the line to evil is fighting all the way to the Supreme Court to sell your product to children. It's all in the book. And so this is this battle of this industry. Not only did they want to steal your kid's sleep, but they fought all the way to the Supreme Court to take the most addictive. And we have a biological drive to survival data, and violence is survival data. So the violent video game, that's the addictive ingredient for kids. It's survival data. It's a mean world. I got to learn to survive in a mean world. And it teaches them the world's a mean world, and it provides killing reflexes. Again, just 1 in a million is an extra 300 murders a day. And so this whole dynamic of selling to your children, and we got to protect our children and protect our civilization. And that's the whole sleep thing is huge.
Yeah.
When my second grade teacher told us cigarettes kill people, I went home and hid my dad's cigarettes. So and mental illness and sleep deprivation. Another one, just do an online search. Sleep deprivation, mental illness, suicide, traffic deaths, chronic pain, obesity. It's all there. Do your own online search. It's all there. It's irrefutable. So I was, I do a lot of teaching school safety. And I told them, look, if you teach the children, A, the amount of sleep that they need, B, and they'll do that. Here's a clock. Count backwards this many hours. That's when you need to go to sleep. They can do that. And then teach them that they need to cut off caffeine shortly after lunch. We're in the middle of a global epidemic of caffeine abuse, macrodoses of caffeine, and it's stopping you. You're getting sleep. You're getting bad quality sleep. That's where the Alzheimer's comes from, is that lack of deep cycle sleep. So number one, cut off caffeine shortly after lunch. Here's how many hours of sleep, and you need to sleep in the dark. Wear a sleep mask, make it as dark as we can. Teach our kids to sleep in the dark. I'm a huge science geek. My favorite website, ScienceDaily.com. I check it every day, every category. Major study in the sleep lab, totally dark room, bathroom light is on and the door is shut. The light coming under the crack of the bathroom door is enough light to stop your body from producing the melatonin you need. In the fire service, they're always in the bunkhouse, and they've always got somebody there they call the dark Nazi. And the dark Nazi guy that spray paints the windows black from the inside. I tell them, guys, that dark Nazi's right. The data's there. So 3 things, just teach kids 3 things. There's a lot of other things of value, but here's how much sleep you need. You've got to get that as a minimum. Number 1, sleep in the dark, cut off caffeine shortly after lunch. Boom. Yeah. And if we teach our children, so I told this, I was teaching a East Texas school safety summit. I said, look, we're going to talk about keeping our kids safe from murder, but I bet none of your students have been murdered. I bet you had suicides. I bet you had traffic deaths. I bet you got mental illness. I bet you got obesity. I bet you got drug overdoses. I said, what can we do about suicide? Sleep. What can we do about mental illness? Sleep. What can we do about traffic deaths? Sleep. You want to walk out that door and save a kid's life. Boom. Sleep is where we begin. And there's a source of wonder, a simple solution to this enormous problem. It's just educating the children in school. We educated a generation about tobacco, and we finally convinced them to stop selling tobacco to children. We didn't ban tobacco. We just said, don't sell this stuff to children. And that's where we draw the line with dangerous things is children, firearms, automobiles. There's so much dangerous stuff. Adults can have them. Kids can't, except the sick industry fighting all the way to sell their product to children. They'll never say, you've been watching shows 48 hours. We're going to turn it off, go to sleep now. They'll never do that.
Yeah. I believe the attention economy is probably the most problematic epidemic of our time. And it's really developed into this blue light technology, the screen time, which tremendously affects your sleep and it affects your nervous system, and it's super bad for you. And I've been interviewing some scientists who study blue light on mice, and how it
Yeah.
makes them pre-diabetic, it makes them lethargic, it makes them
Oh,
obese. And that's just like 10 minutes of exposure. So there's like this whole light story that I think we're missing too when it comes to sleep, because you
yes.
have to get that early morning sun, that circadian rhythm health. And you can't do it if you're sleeping in, then you're popping on your screen first time in the morning, and it's starting to trigger the dopamine track, which is super addictive. And so it just trickles into a compound effect.
Yes.
So I think a lot
Yes.
of it's unplugging and getting back into the natural rhythms that
Yes.
we're meant to have,
Yeah.
and getting outside more.
Yeah.
These
And that
kids are
comes back
stuck in
to
these
on
like
hunting,
light
just
prisons.
getting out there, being part of nature.
Yeah.
I've got my screen is max yellow all the time. And I love it. I got a nice golden glow to my skin, and you look really good. Oh, you look good. But I mean, well, why not have that screen maxed out yellow all the time? My cell phone is maxed out yellow all the time. Apple has it set up with this night watch, and I got to set up this goofy thing where I only have blue light between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. And the rest of the time well, I just want to set a yellow light all the time. You can do that. Boom.
Mm,
Quick, simple fix. I'm just a simple guy, like a one-time fix and move on. Just turn your screen to max yellow all the time. And
yeah.
and it's still you can read, you can use, you do. Life has an old golden glow to it. There's a straight up solution right there. But you're right. The best of all is just nature and outside
Yeah.
and being a part of that.
Yeah.
There's so much research on
Absolutely.
the amount of trees around a school predicting the performance of kids. There was a great study on happiness. Now they looked at hundreds of thousands of Twitter feeds, and they were looking for words like joy and happiness and good time, and the strongest correlation was parks. The only thing that was as strong was Christmas. People going to the park, if it is the same thing as Christmas. It's a little burst of Christmas. I love this the old Chicago song "Saturday in the Park." But
Yeah.
just take your kids to the park, play in the playground, romp in the grass. Spread out a blanket, have a picnic, and it's this incredible form of wellness that's right there. Your local city park, your local, the playground, and make it part of your rhythm of life. We need that. It is so essential for our wellness.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's almost the number one thing is that we were outside for all of human history until recently, and now
Yeah.
we're inside these indoor environments all the time, and we don't really pay attention to it as like probably the number one factor to our health, our
Yeah.
well-being. And if you
Yeah.
stick a plant inside in the dark or in a false lit environment, it's not going to
Yes.
thrive, but you put it
Yes.
outside and it's right where it's meant to be. So I just think getting outside is so underrated, you know?
Yeah. And that's kind of how dogs are good for a wellness because they do get you outside, even if it's just for a little bit to go to the bathroom. First thing in the morning, you stagger out with the dogs, let them
Yeah,
take care of business. Dogs are so good
absolutely.
for wellness in so many ways. And I want to talk to
Absolutely.
you about some kind of Charlie. Charlie here. Charlie up. Good. Now this is Charlie, and he's my service dog. And I want to talk to you about service dogs because look, most service dogs are Rolex. They cost 20, 30,000. There's nothing wrong with buying a Rolex. Nothing wrong with selling one. Nothing wrong with having one. Charlie's a Timex. And there's nothing wrong with the Timex. And we need Timexes out there. Service dogs are so very important to our wellness. So here's what Charlie does. My ears are going out. I sleep heavy. When that alarm goes off, Charlie's in my face. He's my hearing dog. The snooze. By the way, the snooze button is little chunks of your life you throw away. When I do a detailed sleep wellness, never touch that snooze button. It's an evil little button. Charlie tells me, he says snooze. It's an evil button, makes you relive the worst part of every day over and over again. Charlie says the snooze button existential evil. He doesn't believe in it. He's in your face. We're gonna get out. We're gonna go to the bathroom, right? But uh, Charlie lets know somebody's knocking on the door. He lets me know. I'm teaching him. We're driving in the car, and a siren goes off. Now I hear the siren, way too late. My ears are shot, right? But I hear, hey, look, siren! I get you a treat. Very quickly, he's in my face. Where's the treat? I said, where's the siren? I'm looking for the flashing lights. There's so much this old guy can do for us. I carry him in a sling. He travels in. You don't need any government certification. There's a Department of Transportation form to fly in a plane. Don't try to wing it. Go to their website, find the DOT form, fill it out, let them know ahead of time. Charlie travels in a little sling. He's under my shoulder. He goes everywhere with me. It's a little 8-pound dog, travels in a sling. But everybody who sees him smiles and introduce him. There was a lady, I was at Walmart the other day, and just a real downcast, a young girl, a Walmart employee. I'm going to the self-check, right? And I'm waiting in the line. And she's just so sad. And she's looking up. I said, hi, how you doing? She didn't look at me. And I said, hey, this is Charlie. And he's in the little sling, and he's looking up at her, And I said, Charlie, lets me know when the alarm goes off in the morning. He lets me know somebody needs a smile. He kind of cracks a smile. Who can look at a puppy and not smile? And introduced him to kids and people, all around me. Most service dogs, they don't want you petting them. Charlie's got a little vest, says ask to pet, because his job's over first thing in the morning, and then he goofs off for the rest of the day. But
Yeah.
this is a legal service dog, and you take him everywhere, and he sits under the table. Well, he likes ribs. Ribs are our favorite food. We go, I eat most of the ribs. I pass it down to him. They come back like a little piranha, just a little swarm of piranha nibbled all over it. But I just want to tell you, there's one of the great wonders in life is dogs and the joy they bring to our life, and the idea that you can bring your dog everywhere. If you need help getting up in the morning, boom, you have honest, certified, legal ability to have it. I trained this dog. God trained him to get in my face when the alarm goes off in the morning. But there's a source of wonder and wellness that we can reach out and grab and make people smile, and just carry around with you and do good.
Yeah.
Our mission, Jesus says, a new commandment I give you, to love others as I have loved you. Now stop there for a minute. Jesus loved it enough to die for us. Who out there walks out the door every day ready to die for us? First responders. First responders walk out the door. There's nobody else out there who gets up every morning. And Jesus said, greater love is no one than this, that they lay down their life for their friends. So what manner of love is this, that men and women put their life on the line for strangers? What manner of love is this, that men and women walk out the door every day and go outrageous speeds to get to somebody they've never met and put their life on the line for them? But hear that verse one more time. Greater love is no one than this, that they lay down their life for their friends. But they're all your friends. They're all your friends because you're willing to die for them. And sometimes the greatest love is not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice. And that's all in my book. I wrote on combat, and I wrote on spiritual combat, and kind of ties it all together. And while we're talking about that, that great existential question that every first responder's got to ask, and you got to have the answer ready, and you got to have the answer in your heart. And your job is to go to the worst thing that happens every day. Just find the worst thing, and that's your job. And you can't help but ask the question, how could a loving God allow these terrible things to happen? And that's really, really important. And the answer is maybe the most important thing of all. And the answer is we're not God's puppets. We're not little puppets out there being manipulated if a loving God wouldn't do that to you. You ever heard it, if you love something, let it go, it comes back at yours? That's how much God loves us. He loves us enough to let us make our own decisions. That means a lot of people make bad decisions. A lot of bad things happen. You say, God, why don't you do something? He said, I did. I sent you. And that's really our job, is to love others as I have loved you. And you can make an argument it replaces the 10 commandments, or at least a new commandment, or 11 commandments now. Our job is to love and to be better people and to be more loving people. And the greatest wonder of all is I sit here at 68 years old, and I'm going to stay in the fight for another 20 years. I've got the health. And that's so easy for my wife, but I'm driving that, is that we can keep being better people. And just be more loving and be more kind and try to keep pushing that envelope to be better people, and you find yourself kind of getting mad at somebody in traffic. Say, time out. That's not my job. My job. And Jesus said, he said that the commandments, the 10 commandments, It said, basically, love God with all your heart, love others as yourself. Our mission, 4 words: love God, love people. That's our mission, to love God and love people, and to love others as I have loved you. And so our mission is to love. And if we truly love God and love people, then we'll pass on that message, and let people know about that, and that that Jesus died for us, and that he asks one thing of us, is to love them. And so I think about being God's faithful dog. When we get there, he'll greet us as beloved children. That's all I can think of us to be as God, his dog right now. You got silly dogs. I got an old lab. Charlie here. Now, if Charlie says, "Huh, what, huh? Oh, shoot." If I let Charlie, romp around, he'll find something to roll in, something stinky to roll in. I know that's his nature. I still love him. And God sees every stupid thing we do, and he still loves us. All he asks is our love. That's good, because all we got. And to the best of our doggy ability is to just try to obey him. And he understands that's not easy. And so, but Will Rogers said, if you get to think you're a man of some importance, try telling another man's dog what to do. Now, if you ever did that, the dog would look at you. The dog would talk. Here's what he'd say: I don't know much. I'm just a dog. I know this. I'm not your dog. And when you're God's dog, when you give yourself to him, when you're God's dog, and the evil one comes to you, you look in the eye and say, dude, I'm not your dog. That's kind of, on spiritual combat, Christianity in a nutshell there, kind of putting it all together. But it's a great wonder. And one of the life hacks I'd like to give is how not to lose your temper. And as we get older, we get better at that. I ask my audience, how many of y'all got kids? How many of y'all ever seen your parents? You got kids, Ryan?
I don't.
Yeah. I asked them, how many of y'all seen your parents or your kids and said, are you the same ones that raised me? And they all laugh, because they're not. They're more mature. They're better people. They're 20 years old. It's called maturity. We want to get as fast as we can. I did a presentation on a military base, and the colonel running the show I think he got real mad at me. I told him, nobody respects your temper tantrum. The first thing we learn is not to crap ourselves. And that's quite an achievement. That's the autonomic nervous system being brought under control. And life is about that: fight or flight, feed and breed, and bringing it under control. And tell them, just like there's never an appropriate time to crap yourself, there's never an appropriate time to lose your temper. Now, that's easy to say. It ain't so easy to do. But the first step is understanding it's not a good thing. Nobody respects it. It's not helpful. It's not useful. It's you losing control. And so, my cops, people give them the finger and mouth off and disrespect them all the time, right? And a lot of that's bleeding over to fire service and others now. We had a couple of murders of fire service in NYPD or in FDNY, tragic, and just because they're wearing a uniform. And so I tell my cops, I tell them I like Tootsie Rolls. They're individually wrapped. They stay clean. They're good in the heat. They're good in the cold. They remind me of Halloween candy, To have this little baggie full of Tootsie Rolls in the dash of your police car, and you only get to have one. Some use the finger, right? They give the finger, the mouth off. Oh, I got a Tootsie Roll. So a cop in one of my classes said, Dave, he came up during the break. He said, I was eating too many Tootsie Rolls, dude. He said, I was counting down the Tootsie Rolls. It was bad for me. It's not good for you, really, So I use Smarties. That little Smartie, little thing, it's my little chill pill. Take me the finger, I get a Smartie. The only problem is you can't just have one of those little things. They can't have one. So I get a Smartie. I drive around town waving and smiling at people and give me the finger. I get another Smartie. And what I just described to you is actual cognitive behavior therapy. Through your thoughts and your actions, you rewire the way you process things. They think you're hurting you by giving the finger. I get a Smartie. You took what they meant to hurt you and turned it into something positive. And like I said, this just, you do not lose your temper, you give it away. And that's classic Stoicism. But we talk about people who do not get PTSD. And the classic example is Viktor Frankl, in a Nazi death camp, wrote some important words, important books. A human skeleton, unthinkable evil, did not get PTSD. He said, I realized the only thing in the universe those Nazi bastards couldn't control is how I choose to respond. And so you see, you don't lose your temper, you give it away. It's the only thing in the world you can control. And so start working on that. And do that little life hack with your little, with your little, in winter, and I train cops nationwide. During the defund the police thing, getting emails that'll curl your hair. You're the bitch teaching Killology. All these murdering cops were gonna rape your dog and burn your family alive. And I can't control those idiots say, right? What's the only thing I can control? Is how I respond.
Yeah. No, and you seem to have done that too. And the big part that I hear with Viktor Frankl was to be of service to others, and to
Yeah,
have that
that's it.
relationship to
Yeah,
it. And he did that
yeah.
in the concentration camps. And
Yes. And that
you've
one first responder
shared
does.
your belief systems, but you've shown that you've been of service your whole life. And that really
That's the
does
goal.
fulfill you, and it gives you a life of meaning,
Yeah. And what about you as a first responder now? And with this wonder junkie thing, how's it worked out for you to give your life meaning and to feel like that?
It's good. This is like a side project that's more of a hobby because I truly love inspiring curiosity. I think
Yeah,
curiosity and wonder just lead to an infinite doorway of learning and growing
yeah,
and expanding. And I naturally am curious, and I've been cultivating that for many years. But I love to learn from every type of person I can and then share it with other people.
yeah.
And people like yourself that inspire others, and to get the way that you've related to all these experiences and you've got these philosophies. And then I've met other people. I've met physicists, and I had Dan Millman on, who wrote The Peaceful
Very
Warrior.
cool.
Just different folks who have, they've learned and they've served others, and they've got different perspectives. And I think it's healthy to be exposed to people that don't think like us. I
Yeah.
think that's actually really important in this time because we're all being divided,
Yeah.
and everyone's got a camp, and some belief systems are butting up against each other. And it seems like we need to start bridging the gap and having more
Yes.
conversations with
Yes.
everyone, like you said, loving people.
Yes. Yeah.
So
And I think one of the positive things in our society today is the podcast revolution. When I was a kid, we had three networks and one or two newspapers for your region, and maybe six or so national newspapers, national magazines. And if you didn't get in there, your voice was never heard. And we've been through the whole pandemic thing, and some things that were covered up, and some things were exposed, but the point is that throughout human history, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what was covered up because there's no way to get around that. And now, and I was back in the day, I was in 60 Minutes in 2020. It's like, 26, 27 years ago, and it meant nothing. It was a 3-minute soundbite you had no control over, and
mhm.
and now we've completely eliminated that logjam. And we've got people giving greater knowledge and seeking greater knowledge, not just people doing the podcast. The greatest thing is people listening to the podcast. We give honor to them, and it's one of the most positive things in society today. I mean, there's a source of wonder all by itself.
Yeah.
People seeking that deeper meaning, that deeper message. I think we can take some. I think we're going to crack this sleep thing.
Yeah.
There's an industry that's got to be, like you said, the attention industry. It's all they want is our time, but they don't care that they're killing us. They don't care that they're destroying our civilization. Every corporation by definition is a sociopath. I mean, they meet every definition. They're just a sociopath,
Yeah.
and until we force them to do otherwise, they're going to steal our children's sleep and kill our children and kill our way of life. But
Yeah.
I think we'll lick that one. I have faith. I have hope. And I
Yeah.
think this podcast revolution, people providing it, people listening to it, is one of the greatest sources of hope and meaning out there in our society today. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's so powerful that we can talk to people from all over the world and be exposed to ideas from everywhere now. It's
Yeah.
amazing without that person blocking it from us being able to have access. It's amazing.
So what was your
So,
favorite podcast? Here we are at number 66. I'm like, I want to tell, I'm Route 66,
mm,
right? I'm like that connective tissue that pulls it
yeah.
all together. What was your favorite podcast across all these years?
I've only done it for 1 year, but in those 66, God, I've liked so many. I think I love Dan Millman. He's someone I've been reading for years,
Yeah,
and he just condenses things so well and has these packaged ideas that are just, he trims all the fat. And in that 1 hour, it's like I could hand that podcast to anybody, no matter what belief system they come from, and they should be able to still see that he's speaking authentically from the heart. And so anyway, he's just one of those special people to me, and he's been a big
that's for
mentor
sure.
of mine. So
Yeah, and that's something. We think,
yeah.
a firefighter could sit down and have an hour talking with one of the great minds, and you
Yeah.
did that. That's
Someone
pretty
like you.
cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an honor to talk to someone like you as well.
Yeah,
Even if we're not in the same room,
yeah,
we can still have a heartfelt conversation, and who knows who's going to listen, and it might actually change someone's life.
they
So,
will be so. Hey, you talk about those little life hacks, just condensing things down. And so much of that is, it, um, I put a real burden on the suicide thing. And I tell my first responders, I tell everybody, can we all agree? Everybody can agree on one thing. Every living creature agree on one thing. Nobody takes your life without one hell of a fight. Okay, see if head nods on that one.
yeah.
Nobody takes your life, including you, without one hell of a fight. Tell
Yeah,
yourself
that's
right now,
powerful.
I will fight for my life. I will seek counseling. I will get medication. I will leave no rock unturned. I will fight for my life like I'd fight for my child's life, because no one takes my life, including me, without one hell of a fight. Say it again. I will fight for my life. I will seek counseling. I will get medication. I will leave no rock unturned. I will fight for my life like I'd fight for my child's life, because no one takes my life,
Mm,
including me, without one hell of a fight. Because those
that's
folks out
powerful.
there just taking their lives, it just caused me such grievance. It's the ultimate tragedy. And we just put that little seed in their mind. Grossman, you bastard, I just couldn't do it because you planted that seed in my mind. I couldn't pull the trigger, whatever it was. We got to turn the tide on that. It's
Absolutely.
truly one of the most tragic things happening in our society today.
Yeah,
And
it
we
really
can, we
is. And
can do
that's a
it.
powerful message too.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, if you were going to die today, it was your last day on earth, what would you want to say to the world?
What I just told you.
Perfect.
Absolutely. You gave me the opportunity to say the things on top of my heart and say to the world. And I think the final thing would be that there is eternity. Everything on this planet is nothing, nothing, nothing compared to eternity in heaven. And if you think there might be, then it's the most important thing in the universe. And I was a paratrooper, as my young man across the years, jumped out of a lot of planes. And the craziest thing in the world is a night jump. Just a bunch of idiots hurl themselves into the darkness. I mean, it's just the most bizarre thing you have ever seen. And I can't tell you what it feels like. Your heart is pounding, and it's just existential leap of faith. You're confident in the jump master. You're confident in your parachute, That's how it's going to be to die. That's what it feel like to die. It's going to be the last great adventure. It's going to be the
Mm,
last great wonder. It's going to be the door that opens the door to all the other great wonders. And if you think there's a God, then we got to play the game by His rules, and see what it's all about. Maybe that's really the most important thing of all, isn't it? Is eternity is literally infinitely more important than all of our days here on this earth. They're finite, and it's infinite, beyond anything we can comprehend. And so maybe that's the most important thing of all, to tie it up with that and wrap it up with
that's
that.
beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful, to contemplate death and to make peace with it and surrender to it. And all of that is beautiful. So I appreciate your words, and I will make sure to link people to all of your work and your website. And I'm excited to have people reach out and say what they've read and the impact that it's had on them. So
Thanks, Ryan. Be
yeah,
kind to people and be kind to yourself. And God
absolutely.
bless you, brother. God bless
You
America.
too.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the episode. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes, and rate the show. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
What we call reality is in fact nothing more than a culturally sanctioned and linguistically reinforced hallucination.